Today I talk about criticizing others, a great book on competition, and remaking your playstyle from the ground up. Welcome to Mind Games TV, episode 57. So it's been a little bit of a break since my last episode, but I think that we have a consistent schedule coming up. I know at least we have 4 shows this week, and I think I'm actually in Finland next week as well, so we should have 4 shows next week as well. And then I might be out in LA, so I don't know if it'll get interrupted again, but we might be back to consistent shows for the next few weeks, and I really want to get to live streaming them, but the problem is that I think the best time for live streaming is like 1 a.m. LA time, or maybe midnight LA time, which of course in New York is something like 3 a.m. So it's really late for the United States, but it's about the earliest that I can get to work here after dropping the kids off. So I'm not really sure if live streaming will work, but let me know if you're interested in watching the show on Twitch, and maybe at the very least we can throw up a video at a certain time. And I know that there's ways for me to like collect the chat, so that I could maybe take questions and conversation and chat back at people later. But yeah, let me know about that if you have a good time for you that you would like to watch a live show, 8 p.m. after a hard day at work or something like that. And today, so far, I haven't accomplished anything in terms of my morning tasks. The only thing I did well was not eat breakfast, because I'm doing intermittent fasting right now, so I'm not eating anything for about 14 hours, until around 1 p.m. So that's going well. Otherwise, it was just like getting up and going through the motions this morning. But I'm going to push everything off to this evening, and I'm still going to do it today, so that's a promise. You guys should do your daily tasks as well, whether it's meditation or gratitude or a little bit of training or whatever it is. Just push through. Okay, so let's get into the show.
Kim asks, how do you criticize others without being aggressive or passive-aggressive?
This is a good question. And I'm not sure that there's a good answer, because I think that the way that you criticize others is different for each person. Like some people you might actually have to be aggressive to. They won't take criticism otherwise. So let's get to the fundamental kind of basis for criticism. You are giving somebody feedback when you give criticism. So you're saying like, here is information about what you're doing and what you could be doing better. And the goal of the feedback is that they learn something. So in my opinion, it's your goal or your intent that kind of drives your communication style. If your intent is that you want to help them learn something, and you don't care about yourself, okay? You're all about them. And there's nothing in it for you. And by nothing in it for you, I don't mean that you don't get something out of it. That's fine. But I mean, you're not doing it to make yourself feel better. You're not criticizing them in order to build yourself up, in order to knock them down, okay? So you're criticizing them from a completely authentic viewpoint, like let he who is without sin throw the first stone kind of thing. So you do not care if they hate you afterwards, or if they love you afterwards, or if everybody in the room thinks you're dumb, or if everybody in the room thinks you're smart. You're doing it for them. If you're doing it for their learning moment, then you should choose the method that they need to hear the information in. So passive aggressiveness, usually 99% of the time, that's for you. That's because you cannot actually confront people, so you're trying to be passive because you're scared of the situation, or because you kind of know that you're not right, or that they're right, or that you're wrong, or something like that. You're unsure about your information. So passive aggressiveness isn't really a way of criticizing people. It's just like something we do when we're scared about being wrong, or because we're afraid of confrontation. So if you're being passive aggressive, first of all, look inside and see like why it is that you're being passive aggressive, whether it's because you're not orienting yourself towards them, towards serving their needs, or whether you're just, you do want to serve them, but you're just scared. You're scared of the consequences and how it'll look on you, in which case you got some interior work to do before you can do some exterior work on them. So then the question is like aggressiveness. Do you need to be aggressive or not? And that is a question of like how confident they are. So when you have somebody who's like totally unconfident and they need to be built up, then you can provide feedback with, positive reinforcement or negative punishment or positive punishment. So it's not as harsh. But then if they're really set in their ways and they need to be jolted out of their way of thinking, or they just need to be confronted in some way, then a lot of times you will have to go into the negative reinforcement paradigm and get aggressive on them. And that kind of depends on their message. Like, let's say you're dealing with I'm going to generalize here, but let's say you're dealing with a guy or a girl who's just a very, very kind of in your face kind of person, and they say it as it is, and they don't mind sharing their own criticism. And when somebody attacks them, they fight back, and then they listen. So that's going to be an aggressive situation. Or let's say you're talking to somebody who isn't like that at all, that is always listening and always contemplating and always giving people the time of day. Then you can probably be a lot more gentle in your aggressiveness. So, Kim, how do you criticize others without being passive-aggressive or aggressive? If it's passive-aggressive, you're kind of starting from the wrong space. So work on yourself a bit. Make sure that you are up to the confrontation and that you're not doing it for selfish reasons, or they're not being held back by selfish reasons. And number two, if it's aggressive, then that might be what that person needs, but orient yourself towards what they need to hear in order to get the message.
Anonymous asks, could you link me some information on the brain chemistry for challenge versus threat?
So in a previous show, I talked about how we do research on challenge versus threat and kind of what happens in the brain in this cascade of chemicals and the suppression of certain brain mechanisms and the lowering of reaction speed and all this stuff that happens when you perceive a situation differently. Same situation, different perception. Challenge, like an opportunity, versus a threat, being something that's going to like belittle us. And I think a really good place to start for this, so if you use the keywords challenge and threat and sport psychology in something like Google Scholar, you'll come up with the field of research on it, more or less. Or you could do neuroscience. But a really good place to find a colloquial summary of this, and also references to other research that are like more canon pieces, is Top Dog, The Science of Winning and Losing by Ashley Merriman and Poe Branson. Okay, now I'm actually going to go onto the internet in the middle of this episode and make sure. Yeah, Poe Bronson and Ashley Merriman. So that's a book basically about the neuroscience of winning and losing, of top performance, of peak performance. And in there, they cover the challenge versus threat idea, and they present a lot of the cascade that happens. And so that's a really super great like introduction to the topic. And I think it presents all of the findings, and I think probably maybe references in the end. I can actually check on that at some point. And but if you go to Amazon, I think you can do a sample of the book and maybe just peek at the end, see if there's references there as well. So that's the book I recommend. And I'll put a link down below. Click it. And I get a penny if you buy it. Yes.
Anonymous asks, how do I remodel my playstyle completely from the ground up? From objective-oriented to carry-oriented, for example.
The context, I think this is a Halo 5 player. So the context, I'm going to answer this in terms of like meta esport, so it doesn't have to do with just Halo or just League of Legends or just Counter-Strike. So the basic premise is that you have a habit and you want to change your habit. And your habit is a couple things. You have a decision-making habit. So when a situation comes up, you make a certain decision. It's the path of least resistance, the easiest one. And when a physical scenario comes up, your reflexes act a certain way. They make their default habit. And it's the path of most traveled, so the path of least resistance in the brain as well for that reflex. And the way that you change these is the same way that you would essentially... Okay, that's false. Let me back up. It is not the same way that you would learn a skill from scratch. Because if you were learning a skill from scratch, you have nothing interfering with you. And you know as well as I do that if you're trying to learn a new skill that is only slightly better or slightly different than a skill you already know, you get lots of interference. before you realize it, your habits are creeping back in, and you spent an entire game reinforcing your old play style instead of practicing your new one. So the way that I recommend training a new play style is that you have to train a new style of thinking, and you have to reflect a lot. So I like to extend the training outside of the game. I want you to look for a situation where you could be more aggressive in the game, more fearless, and pick something like, for example, let's say in League of Legends, you would choose an assassin character, or you would decide that you're only going to gank in this game as a jungler. In Halo, I'm not exactly sure how that translates. You're going to have to figure it out for yourself, but you want to choose a role or a weapon or a vehicle that promotes aggression in as much as you can. Something that does not forgive safety. So like it doesn't forgive you if you make a mistake. If you're aggressive and you screw up, you get punished. Okay, so it's painful, and you only have one choice, and that's aggression. So you're taking away the opportunity for safety in the first place. Okay. Now, one example of this, by the way, from Counter-Strike is when I wanted to learn how to play entry fragger, I just only bought shotguns. So then I had to be positioned really close to the enemy, and so I would rush and I would charge all the time, and I would make sure that I was always trying to be in the right spot at the right time as aggressively as possible. So there's another example. Okay, so then you extend that training outside of the game. So you look at a situation where you have to trust yourself, and that you're not doing so. So you might say, for example, I am afraid of being the person who raises my hand in class and goes and writes the example on the board. Or I'm afraid of sitting with strangers at lunch in the university cafeteria and just meeting new people. Or something like that. And you push that barrier. You train your mind to push against that resistance in some situation in your normal life. It doesn't have to be something drastic, like something crazy. Just pick something slightly outside of your abilities or your comfort zone and go and do it. And pay attention to your mindset when you do it, because it's going to be uncomfortable, and you might fail, and you're going to be fearing the failure and knowing that it's likely. And you might fail. Like the people at the table that you sit down at might ditch you and just run off. But the act of feeling that resistance and that fear of failure and that probability of failure and then doing it anyway, that is the same skill that you need to employ in the game, because you're going to suck at this new play style and you're going to want to use the old one, and your habits are going to push you to the old one, and you're going to have to constantly remembering to push against that resistance and to accept the failure and to fail over and over and over and over again until you have been able to build up the same skill level in the new playstyle. Understand that there are a bunch of things from your old playstyle that will not transfer over, okay? Because they're part of that physical motor reflex, and now you're training a new motor reflex, and you're going to have to put in the same amount of hours to train that motor reflex as you did for the original one. So it's going to take you a while to get up to that skill level. On the other hand, there are plenty of things that do transfer over in terms of mental strength, in terms of decision making, in terms of knowing how and where to attack people who are playing the objective-oriented or support-oriented playstyle. You know all of their weaknesses because you were one. You have a bunch of aiming reflexes that are and motor reflexes related to moving the keyboard and the mice that are very refined. So you're going to be able to pick yourself up by your bootstraps very swiftly in comparison to a complete beginner, even though you're going to go through weeks and weeks and maybe months of failure in pursuit of this new style. So decision making, try to make it as easy as possible to decide to be aggressive. And then reflexes, try to understand that it's a statistical game and you got to get the statistics down. And so you have to fail over and over. You have to fail forward and not backwards. And then reinforce your confidence outside the game. So it's really easy for somebody who's very muscular and works out every day and has like a very good view of their own body and a pretty strong relationship with their health to go into a game and fail, because it's not their identity, or at least they have an identity outside of that. So find a way to be proud of yourself outside of the game with things that you're overcoming, whether that's in class or in the lunchroom like talked about, or just your ability to face a tough situation and overcome it and survive. anything that you do in a real life social situation is going to so trump like the kind of piddly failures that we have in an online environment where we aren't with real people usually, that you're going to be able to succeed at a much higher level with your own self-efficacy, with the belief in yourself. So those are my recommendations for how to change your playstyle. By the way, if you're playing with a group of friends, you want to make sure that they know what you're going through. You want to make sure that they give you what you need to succeed. So whether it's you need support at some point, or you need to be like, in a very British kind of way, like, have your jimmies rustled, or maybe that's Australian, like be punched in the shoulder in the way of getting support, told to like quit being a pussy or whatever, like how friends would support each other by making fun of each other or whatever. Just understand what it is that you need from your support network and tell them, teach them, train them what to say to you to get you motivated to fail forward. Okay. That is the show today, episode 57. Thanks for stopping by. And remember to ask a question. Hashtag Ask Weldon, or go to mindgames.gg/TV. And there's a form there you can use to email me a question. You can check anonymous there. So if you want to leave an anonymous question, that's your best bet. And Instagram, if you want to leave a video question, go for it. I have my Instagram up at Mind Games Weldon as well. And by the way, follow me on Snapchat if you're interested in seeing the behind the scenes of these workshops and trainings and stuff that I'm doing all day, because over the next few weeks, whenever I have like a workshop with a team or something like that, I had one with Splice a few days ago, had one with Fnatic a week ago or so. I'm on behind the scenes on Snapchat, like basically sharing tidbits of what we're doing. So it's like a mini live version of this show as we go along. And my Snapchat, I think, is Mind Games Weldon. So hit me up on there. And if I can find a way to save Snapchat video, you can ask me questions on there and I can put them in the show as well. But anyways, you can ask me a question straight up and I'll just snap you back with a quick, 15-second answer. So if you have any specific, like, hey, I just want advice about this one quick thing, like that's probably the best way to reach me at this point. Twitter message also, but Snapchat, I can just reply on video really easily, so it's nice. All right. I want to end with a quote. Experience is a hard teacher because she gives the test first, the lesson afterwards. Vernon Law.